Hey, fellow patriots, I'm Bree.
And I'm Blaze. Some call me Pa. It has been said that we have 4 boxes to keep ourselves free. These are the soapbox, the ballot box, the jury box, and the ammo box.
And we are the 4th box. We are here to arm you with enough information, resources, and skills to take back your freedom, increase your self-sufficiency, and inspire you to join in the fight against tyranny.
Thomas Jefferson said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." Thank you for joining us and for joining in this fight.
Welcome back to the 4th box. Okay, everybody, welcome back once again. If you joined us last week, you know that this is actually part 2, and we are recording all of this the same time we recorded last week's episode. So bear with us if we hit on any topics that maybe aren't brand new, hot off the press information tonight, but still just as happy to be here. We are actually currently traveling by the time this episode goes live. We are in Sturgis, South Dakota, and very happy to be here. So, Pops, I'll pass it off to you for our toast for the night.
Greetings to all of our longtime listeners, first-time listeners, friends, patriots around the country, and especially to the motorcycling community who we are happy to join in beautiful Sturgis, South Dakota, one of our favorite places, the Black Hills, western South Dakota. Beautiful, beautiful country out there, and all the wonderful patriots who largely make up a significant piece, many of which are prior serving and currently serving American veterans. Here's to all of you. Enjoy seeing you out in Sturgis, South Dakota.
Cheers.
So I do have a quote. Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. And that was from John Adams, second president of the...
Ouch.
Yeah. And you know, one of the things we always try to do when we have friends on our side that are truly looking to preserve liberty that call us a democracy, it's wrong. We all need to call that out. We are a republic, and most importantly, we are a constitutional republic. So that's the point that John Adams was making here. We did not set up a democracy. We set up something different, and he explains what happens to a democracy. So I love that quote. John Adams was another significant foundational piece of this country, and he had a lot of great wisdom which still applies today, and that certainly is one of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a kind of a little bit of a depressing quote, even though you're right, we're not a democracy, but immediately it makes my mind go to Benjamin Franklin saying, a republic, if you can keep it. And that's where we're at. That's the question. Can we keep it? It is it's the first of its kind. And we've been doing pretty good so far, but we're right at that point of 200 and some years where things start to look pretty rough and kind of fizzle out. So we're in the if you can keep it phase, and that's the question that we ask here every week. Yep. Can we keep it?
Yep. And our effort is to encourage people to get up, participate, know what these documents say, know what kind of government we're supposed to have, or we will lose the republic. We will lose it if it's not gone already. So we gotta react quickly. We gotta mobilize. We gotta get people educated, motivated, and out there defense of the republic.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly a cool thing to be a part of. Like, it's a really bad time in history, but it's a cool time to get involved and have an opportunity to be a part of history. So I think that people should be interested in this. Even, yeah, maybe that's easy for you and I to say, but I do think it's a really interesting time to be alive and just to kind of watch events unfold and take action and be a part of it, because this is really the time to prove whether or not you are a patriot, whether or not you really have any true value of this country, whether you want to represent this country for what it was meant to be. And I think that's an exciting thing to be a part of. So obviously, that's what we're trying to do. And we're happy to be back every week. Just keep spreading that same message.
That's correct. Cheers.
Cheers. We love a double cheers. So, for those of you who joined us last week and are joining us once again, we are going to pick up the conversation where it left off. If you're tuning in this week and you did not listen to last week, go listen to last week, because this is a part 1, part 2 situation. And it's going to not make sense where we start the episode if you just jump in right now. All right. So, last week we talked about the control grid, the takeover of humanity by not just AI, but by the global elites, and sort of using AI to usher in this control grid on a big scale. Implementing more surveillance, using biometrics, all kinds of things. We're really getting kind of dirty with the way we're playing now. And it's very obvious with all of the examples that we touched on last week. So, picking up right where we left off, considering all the things that we talked about in last week's episode, how would it likely actually start if it hasn't already? Which I am personally of the belief that it has started. And the first answer to that, how would it likely start, is that it would start slowly. Again, purely theoretical here, right? But it wouldn't happen overnight. And that's why I believe that this has already started. This control grid is already in place. And I am going to back this up with factual information as to why I think this. But let's just touch on a couple other ideas here. So first we have crisis, response, solution. We already know how this plays out. We've seen a crisis in recent years. Let me give you an example. COVID-19. We can use a pandemic or any sort of terror attack to justify lockdowns, digital IDs, mass surveillance, anything to say we are making you safer. There are so many opportunities here for a big event. And in fact, 2 weeks back when we talked with Denny, you had mentioned this. Expect a big event. It could be a nuclear event. It could be any triggering of war of any kind. Expect one of these, because this is kind of where we're at now, where it's like we're waiting for the ball to drop. When one of these crises happens, that's when we, the people, not just the American people, on a global scale, there will be a response. There will be an inherent response, probably out of fear. And the government will come in with none other than a solution. And that is when they will instate these control grid type solutions, surveillance, lockdowns, etc. Anything to add there?
Yeah, and I think we, as you mentioned, we talked a little bit about some of these topics last week, and I think in this particular point, I would suggest that a lot of these things are already foundationally in place when you think about how many transactions you make with a digital chip card where it's running through a computer into a database, and who knows where that information's shared. So I think a lot of these patterns, lifestyle patterns, where we move, I think a lot of the groundwork is already in place, being collected in these huge computer banks that are being run by the government. I think a lot of this stuff that is preemptive to the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight are already in place. And we all kind of have just naturally morphed into it with the use of, chip cards and all of those sorts of things. Every time you get on the phone or the computer, all of the information is being captured. who you talked to, what sites you visited, how long you were on, all of this stuff, what you're interested in. And information is power, and they are collecting information on every single one of us. So I think the groundwork is already in place, and the foundational pieces of this are already active.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a fantastic point. It's so easy to just get on our phone and think it's convenient that we get an ad that is catered specifically to us, but what is that? That should freak us out a little bit. And I think in the beginning it did. I think I can recall, a couple years ago hearing, "Oh, it's so weird that I was talking about, Adidas shoes and now I get an ad for Adidas shoes." Like, now I don't even hear people talk about it because you're already accustomed to the fact that your phone and your computer and everything connected to your Wi-Fi knows what you like. And isn't that weird? And if it can do it, imagine that in a system that is completely interconnected around the globe between governments globally. Does that not freak you out a little bit? Yeah, I think that's safe to say, Pops. We're there when you think about it like that.
Yeah, and not only that, I think we talked last week about the number of cameras. So not only is it directly in your pocket, but every time your license plate goes by, it's being recorded on a camera downtown at the stoplight. All of your movements in almost all public places, except the deepest, darkest national forest someplace, and quite honestly, maybe even there, satellite tracking and all the rest of it. We are being monitored from 100 different angles, vantage points every single day, every movement. And if somebody wanted to go in and study any one of us, such as we suggested last week, as somebody who may be standing as an outspoken person against the agenda or against all this sort of thing, they can sit down and monitor every single thing we're doing. And if somebody wanted to cause a great inconvenience in your life, they have all the information they need to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We're in the Orwellian dystopia already. It is too late to turn back the table. So let's go into the next one here. It ties perfectly in. Consolidation of infrastructure. A cashless economy. Okay. Yeah, check. Digital health passports. Oh, yeah. I think a lot of you are pretty familiar with those. Connected homes, cars, and appliances. This one's really interesting. Let's think about the fact that your refrigerator is connected to your Wi-Fi. Your Ring camera can be hacked by virtually anyone. Everyone. That means everyone coming in and out of your house. That means the security cameras that are inside your house can be hacked by anyone. Everything is accessible because you've made it that way. You have allowed the infrastructure that surrounds your life, from your car to the selections that you make on Netflix. You have made everything about yourself accessible to anyone who wants the information. That's crazy. The other part of this is that, remember the whole own nothing and be happy bit? We are there. Everything is for rent. Not only has the fact that, the people don't own their own homes anymore become a normal thing. Like, yes, it is actually becoming more and more common for people to rent because they think it's more affordable, because they think it's easier, because it's way harder to buy land and a home anymore than it is to simply rent. Not only is that reality, but let's think about something more simple. Movies, music. Remember when you used to own CDs and you used to own VHS tapes? You don't now. You rent them. You get a Netflix subscription and you don't own anything. You pay somebody every single month to own nothing, and you're happy about it. And you use Spotify or iTunes and you don't own any music, but you pay somebody every single month and you're happy about it. But you don't own anything. You don't have a collection of cassette tapes or CDs or records, but you still pay for nothing every month. And I get it. I get why it's convenient, right? But like, when you start thinking about all these things together that you do, that you rent, that you do not own, and you realize that you enjoy it, you understand that whole quote about "you will own nothing and be happy," is already our reality. And that should scare you.
I hope so, but I doubt it. I think people, and we touched on it at the last episode. I think there is inherently in humans, a trait to be lazy, and the more convenient things are, the better we like it. And I think somewhere a long time ago, somebody recognized that. So the way to gain control is to make things convenient. Now you can steer people exactly where you want them to go through the convenience that you've provided them. And I think we're so immersed in it as a society. It just tears my heart out when I see these 2 and 3 year old kids in a baby carriage with a tablet on their lap.
Yeah.
They are completely oblivious to the world around them, where they should be having this sponge-like mind that's looking and listening and feeling and smelling all of the world around them. Instead, they're focused completely, and the parents are happy. The kid's not crying. He's sitting back in the back of the car seat or in the baby carriage with a little tablet on their lap, playing games or whatever the hell they put on there for kids. But they are completely disconnected from the world, and I think that's to somebody's benefit, and that is where we're losing it. We are taking advantage of the convenience that they've made available to us, and have walked ourselves into the pen. We are enslaving ourselves. The old quote: "It's hard to free fools from the chains they revere." We love the chains that bind us. That is where we're at.
For sure. The chains are comfortable. The
Yep.
chains are convenient. The chains are easy. The chains are fast. We love that.
Yep.
And that goes right into the very next point. And remember what we're talking about here. Remember what is the question. Considering all of the AI infrastructure that exists already, considering all of these tools that the control grid, the control overlords have implemented, how does this full takeover start? Remember, that is the question. And the last piece here is normalization through convenience, which ties in directly to what you just said. It is so easy to relinquish our power to convenience.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about smart homes. We talked about smart technology in our phone, in our appliances. Biometric logins. We talked about that last week. We talked about how easy it is to scan your palm. It takes a whole extra maybe 13 seconds compared to pulling out a card or cash out of your wallet. Cash is almost obsolete. Now we're going to make cards obsolete by simply, scanning an eyeball or adding a palm. How is adding that information about yourself to a global cloud going to be a good thing? How do you see that ending? But it doesn't matter because it's convenient and it's fast and I'm on the go and I have a busy life. You have a busy life because the government made you have a busy life. You had a busy life because they forced you into a rat race that you, as a human being living in a beautiful world, should have never been forced into.
Mm-hmm.
So you're chasing a convenience that you shouldn't even require because you should be appreciating the world in a much different way. But all of these poisons were forced down your throat. So now you chase the convenience of getting out of them. That is so messed up. But it's what's happening.
Yeah, so many times, past podcasts and otherwise, we've used the Alexander Teitler quote about the big cycle of life, the big cycle of governments, and really, I think that you can step back at a distance and look and see that. It appears daunting, it appears as though there's no way out, but I have faith in the human spirit. I have faith in the fact that humans will always find a way to unencumber themselves from slavery. So the problem today is most people don't recognize that they're enslaved, but there will come a day when they do. And that's when the thought about Alexander Teitler came to mind, where he says people will always end up in bondage. That's slavery. From bondage, you gain great spiritual courage. You know what that is? That's a turning back to faith. Get great spiritual courage. So we are still down in the belly of the beast here. We're at the bottom. Most of society don't recognize we are living in bondage. We are enslaved by those that have taken all of these conveniences and made them available to us, and we have become enslaved. So at some point, as you mentioned last week, the younger generation coming up, maybe it's that one, maybe it's the one after, they get tired of the bondage in which they're living. They gain great spiritual courage. From that spiritual courage and a return to faith and those foundational principles, they win back their freedom. They become unencumbered from the chains that bind them. And then from winning back their freedom, they become prosperous, just like the history of this nation. However, when you reach that peak, that's short-lived too, just like at the bottom. From prosperity, you become complacent. You start to take it for granted. You start to not apply the same effort. You become apathetic. You become dependent, and you're back into bondage, and the cycle begins again. That's what the story we're telling here. I have faith in the human spirit. I wish we could talk our way out of it, but it's probably going to take a generation or two in the belly of the beast, enslaved, whether it be electronically, digitally, or physically, bonded. And it's going to take enslavement before enough people wake up and say, I'm tired of this, I'm not living like this, and they fight their way out through the gain of spiritual courage.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. Like, I agree with you 100%. I have faith in the human spirit. I have faith in people to, even a small number, which we know it will be. I have faith in a small number of people to stand up and say no.
Amen.
Like, that's never going to be me. I have absolute faith in that, because I really believe that there are so many people who know truth in their heart, like who know what is real. And I also believe that of that number of people, there are people who don't care what it costs. And that's a small number, but it exists. And that being said, to your point, still means we're going to have to go through the lowest low, but we'll pull out of it. I'm kind of just, I want to skip the low, right? I want to just get to the good stuff, but it's not really been that way in the past. So I don't, we're going to have to go through some bad times here. But some of the things you mentioned, the last thing I wanted to say on the note about normalization through convenience. With this idea, tech becomes so embedded that people don't notice the loss of autonomy, which is very much on par with what you just said. And I think that's very much where we're at, is that people don't know that they've lost their independence, that they've actually given away their human spirit in a big sense. You talk about the little kids that are playing on iPads and not paying attention to the world around them. When we think about adults, let's look at people like college age. They're having AI write their papers. Okay, you're not learning any of that information. You're going to go into an industry that you have a degree for, but you didn't do any actual work to know what that information is. Well, I hate to tell you this, but you're going to be the first one to go, because if AI could write your papers, then AI can do your job. You're not necessary. All right, let's look at adults that are not in college. Let's look at adults further down the line here. Let's just say you want to, I don't know, the same way you would have asked Google a question 4 years ago, 3 years ago. You just search something on Google because you passed a street sign, about a historic town, a historic building, or a bird that you saw. You want information. So before, you would just research that information. Maybe you would even go and find a book on it. You would read about it. Instead, now, you ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT, when you ask it that information and you read it, it's the same as being on TikTok or Instagram and absorbing a 20-second reel. You will not remember it. The memory does not transfer over. It does not create a lasting impression on your brain, so you will not actually learn anything from that experience. You can look it up, and in the moment, you'll understand the answer. Absolutely. But you will not remember it long term. So you're not actually gaining knowledge. So the ability to think critically goes away even from this point on, even if you've had critical thinking your whole life, because once the reliance starts on technology, you will fizzle out. Because your brain stops working, because it doesn't have to work anymore. It's actually that easy. And that sounds absurd to say, but it's true. There's real studies on this, and you can go look it up for yourself if you don't believe me. This is a real thing. This is a real thing that's going to happen to us as a society, as a people, as a species. We are losing our ability to do anything for ourselves because we're giving it away in the name of convenience.
I cannot disagree with one part of that. And the trouble that you alluded to as you began that segment there is no way out of this without some ass ache. There is going to be, we as a society are going to experience a loss in the comforts that we've grown used to. We're going to, or worse, it'll be a loss of many lives to try and turn this thing around. There is going to be some ass ache ahead simply by wishing and hoping, and us using the soapbox, such as the fourth box, trying to encourage people. The allure is too strong, the convenience is too plentiful. The other distractions that keep, hey, if people can go play their round of golf, they can get a beer, they can go home and rest in a comfortable place and turn the television on. All is well with the world. They don't even recognize that every moment of their life is under the control and surveillance of somebody else. They think they are living like a king. And until they recognize, and that's going to take some kind of a catastrophic event, that simply is not so, we're not going to talk them out. You're going to have a hard time convincing people that our children are enslaved and we're enslaved. We're working for the benefit of somebody else who's lording it over us. If they have the opportunity to go to the football game on Sunday or go to the movie or the shopping mall, whatever those things that they like to do, as long as they still have those conveniences at the fingertips, they think they're free and living the life of Riley, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. And I could go into this more, but I have so much more I want to add. So I'm going to not tangent down that point, though it was a good one. And I'm going to jump directly into my next point here. We talked last week about all of the details of what an AI takeover or massive control takeover from the global cabal would look like. And we started this week by saying, okay, if that were to happen, how would it begin? Now I would like to present to you some facts of that we're already there, and it's been going on for a long time. It's not a new thing. It's not something that's been happening since we did this podcast. It's actually quite a bit older. So I'm pulling a little bit of information off of a Twitter post I saw, but I backed all of these up. I spent a lot of time confirming that every single one of these was accurate, and I added in some of my own to fill in the blanks. So the question, are we already there? Are we already at the control grid point? The control grid being a global control. We talk about, Great Reset here. Think like we're talking about one world government having control over the whole people. That's what we're talking about here. Again, to reiterate our point last week, this is not a Republican Democrat issue. This is not a I like Trump, I hate Trump issue. This is none of those things. This is a lot bigger than that. And the question that I'm asking here as I present these points to you is someone maybe pulling the string behind the curtains? Because as we go through all of these, you'll notice that there's a similar theme. There is a trend happening that's been happening for many years. And it doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican. So I'm going to go through the list of some presidents, and this is certainly not an exhaustive list. This is not every executive order passed under this person who ties in to controlling the population on a global scale. I will present to you the ones that I have, because if I presented more, we'd be here for 3 hours. We're going to start with Gerald Ford, 1976, Executive Order 11921. This authorized federal control over the workforce and domestic production during an emergency. That sounds pretty harmless. Let's move to the next one. Jimmy Carter, 1979. Executive Order 12171. Seized foreign assets and established emergency authority over military and property during international crises. Sure, an international crisis. That does sound important. It's only doing this, it's only seizing assets, and it's only establishing authority during a crisis. Okay, got it. Ronald Reagan, 1988, Executive Order 12656, assigned emergency preparedness roles to every federal agency. This became the backbone of government continuity planning. George H.W. Bush, 1990, Executive Order 12734. Notice I'm giving you the executive order numbers so you can look it up yourself. Gave the military power to seize control of U.S. transportation systems, meaning control the roads. Now, what happens when you control the roads? You control all of us, right? Imagine what happens if you can suddenly not go anywhere without government oversight. Little concerning, right? But remember, this is just an emergency action. This is just in case. Now, why would you put something like that in place just in case? Think about all the things that have already happened through several years, right? Going back to, let's just start with Gerald Ford in 1976. Okay, we're already at 1990. Let's keep going. Bill Clinton, 1994, Executive Order 12919. Allows federal agencies to take control of resources from the following industries in times of crisis: food, water, energy, labor, transportation, communications, even the authority to direct civilian labor. This one is a big one. Probably didn't get talked about a lot during Bill Clinton's era. This one allowed for, during a crisis, the federal government to come into anyone involved in any of these spaces: food, water, energy, labor, transportation, communications, take total control of resources, materials, even the labor of people who are not government employees. All right, sure, seems fine. Let's move to the next one. Obama, 2012 through 2015. There's a couple here. Executive Order 13603, full spectrum control over national resources and labor. Executive Order 13618, federal takeover of communication during crisis. Again, remember, these are always during crisis scenarios. Executive Order 13694, asset seizures and cyber emergency sanctions. Okay, again, these are all just in case. Then we have Donald Trump's first time in office, 2019 through 2020. Executive Order 13873 declared a national emergency over foreign cyber threats, giving the federal government power to block or monitor digital communications. Personally, I don't remember talking about this. Sure, it's for foreign cyber threats, but this can translate into any of the conversations we had about getting involved with social media, alternative news. And remember, sure, maybe Trump is the one who signed this executive order, but Trump's not always going to be in office. What happens when the person that you don't like gets into office and now has the ability to block or monitor any digital communication that they view as a threat? That's pretty broad. Let's move to Joe Biden, 2022. Oh my gosh, I didn't even write down the executive order number. I'll find it. I'll put it in the notes. Executive order, don't remember which number. Sorry, forgot to write it down. This one opened the door for a U.S. central bank digital currency, which means government control over personal spending, real-time tracking of transactions, the end of physical cash and private banking, and increased federal authority in times of, you guessed it, financial crisis. Today, what do we have going on now in Trump's second term? Big, beautiful bill. Billions of dollars allocated towards AI infrastructure. We have the Clarity Act and the Genius Act, which we just talked about 2 weeks ago. Massive, massive partnership between the government and Palantir. They can track everything. Palantir can track everything and has been tracking everything. Phone logs, content, license plates, bank records, surveillance feeds. You want to talk about the cameras that are under the stop signs? Done. You want to talk about the license plates when you drive into the toll booth? Done. You want to talk about what you're looking up on your phone? Done. In 2012, Palantir partnered with New Orleans police. They crunched arrest records and gang affiliations. Then they quietly flagged high-risk individuals for future crimes. We just talked about this. We talked about a preconceived threat, an AI generated threat, somebody who is basing off of preemptive judgments. Palantir has already done this. 2012, that's over a decade ago. What do you think they can do now? And they're partnered with the federal government. Emails, web browsing, badge swipes, phone calls. These are all the things that Palantir helped JP Morgan track. Executives were tracked without authorization. Nothing that was used inside the building was private. That means personal phones, personal laptops, anything on the servers were tracked because JP Morgan utilized Palantir's surveillance tech to track what was going on in their company. Now it's being used by the government. Trump signed an executive order that every federal agency must now share their data with Palantir. Every federal agency. That means tax records. That means your health data, immigration files, surveillance logs. This is everything that, let's not say the government has on you, let's say that exists about you. If it's out there, Palantir will have it, and that means that the federal government has it. So, getting back to the main point, are we already there? Pops, what do you think?
Yeah, well, a lot to pick apart there. Of course, we're there, and we've been there for a long time. And these pieces have been put in place, as you suggested, through these various executive orders dating back to 1976, and probably before, if you continue to do some research. A couple of things I want to pick apart. Number one, crisis. It's a very subjective term. Who gets to define what a crisis consists of? And then once you declare it a crisis, let me remind you that the law enforcement agencies involved with January 6th declared it a crisis. That enables all federal agencies to participate in these activities you just mentioned. So crisis is very subjective, and depending who's behind the steering wheel, they get to define whether or not it's a crisis. So very, very concerning that it sounds wonderful. Well, it's only going to be in a crisis, but who gets to define the crises? Number two, even though there is talk about a lot of these executive orders that mostly get washed under the bridge very quietly, unlike significant bills that get passed by Congress, which takes 435 people in the House and 100 in the Senate to approve, this has essentially created, through executive orders, we have created a monarchy in our government where they can direct federal agencies to do things that are completely unconstitutional. And again, by us being asleep, we have watched these things go on, but we have done nothing to stop it. And one of the points I wanted to make is, even though there may be an outcry about an executive order during one administration or another, have you ever heard of one being rescinded?
Right.
And lastly, again, I call upon the founders, those of which who had so much superior wisdom and foresight than what is being exhibited today. But they made the observation that when people fear government, you have tyranny. Well, those of us that are aware of these conditions that you just mentioned through the surveillance state and all kind of monitoring of our activities and daily lives, obviously this is fearful to me. I don't like that. Well, when the people fear government, you have tyranny. We are clearly living under tyranny. You know, years and years ago at the founding of our country, the definition of tyranny was taxation without representation. This is simply the surveillance state and the total control the federal government has over all aspects of our life. That causes fear in me. That would suggest that we are all living in tyranny, whether or not most people recognize it. And conversely, if the government fears the people, which they should, government should fear the people, not the deep state and the global cabal behind it, because that's who they answer to. But when the government fears the people, you have liberty. We want those scoundrels, skunks, criminals, thieves, leeches, and liars that occupy our seats to fear us, because here government is run by we the people, not the other way around. So we have a lot of work to do to reverse this trend. But all of this stuff, as we talked about earlier in the segment, that we believe is some convenience. Oh, we can run through the store and put our palm on the scanner and get our, all of our food bill will be taken automatically. We view this as a convenience and a luxury. It is not. It's enslavement. It is enslavement. And we need to wake up to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So with all of that, I love that you brought up the point about we're clearly in a state of tyranny when we fear the government. I mean, things like this can't be going on without some level of fear. I think there are people who maybe don't necessarily fear the government, but they understand it's going on and think, oh, that sucks. Like, but that's it. Like, that's really it. That's it. That's what we're going to say. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go, oh, that sucks. Like, what are we going to do about it?
Right.
There is so much of this government oversight, this government control. It's like, yeah, there's a control grid coming. Like, we're in it. We've been in it. It doesn't feel maybe quite as like tight and constrained as you imagined. We think about last week we talked about Brave New World. Maybe it doesn't feel quite that dystopian, but you really think we're not in it right now? So let's talk about that. We talked about, the whole depopulation efforts last week, and I want to get into that more here because this is important, because as we start to see these grips of control tightening around us, we start to probably see the population shrink further, because all these things are together. They're tied. They're connected to one another. And it makes sense that one happens while the other happens, and they further exacerbate each other. It is, the snake eating its own tail. That's what all of this is. So let's talk about some of these ways that they're already controlling us and it's already impacting our lives. Control of the weather. So one thing, I don't know if you saw this article, New Mexico just wrote into law that any water from cloud seeding shall be considered natural, as if no seeding happened. Okay, so that's one state. Not every state is cloud seeding, but most of them are at this point. We've talked about Texas. We talked about what happened at Camp Mystic. We talked about Rainmaker and Augusta Storico, and he's not the only one. Cloud seeding is not new. Cloud seeding has been going on for a very, very long time, and there's plenty of accounts to prove it. There are plenty of CIA operations, if you feel like digging into it, that go back a very long time for cloud seeding. Weather modification has been used as a weapon for a long time. So now we think climate change is our enemy. So what better weapon than weather modification once again? Cloud seeding is a great option. So now you have New Mexico, again, one state, but this is just the beginning, who's saying any water that comes from these projects will be considered natural. What does that mean? That means no one's held liable when something happens. That means when a second Camp Mystic flood happens and a bunch of people die, there's nobody to be held accountable.
Because
that's not okay.
Yep. So that's what people got to recognize, is these pieces are all put in place to protect those who are benefiting from it and to take advantage of us, we the peons, who are going to pay the price. And we have to stop looking at this stuff as though it's presented as a benefit to us. All of these things are measures of control, or they are measures to steal the wealth of the common folk. and give it to those who choose to lord it over us. We simply have got to open up our eyes and start recognizing things for what they are.
Yeah, that's just it. I mean, sure, if you want to say, oh, it's helping climate change, okay, sure, whatever, dude. Like, that's insane that you would actually think that without looking at the bigger repercussions. If you really believe that, you have done no research into conservation of the planet. Anyone who has any understanding of how this planet is conserved long term knows that us messing with it has nothing to do with how that works. If you think otherwise, if you think that us being people, being a species, one species on this planet, getting involved is how we stop anything from occurring long term, you don't know what you're talking about, or you're lying.
No, probably bigger than that is you're a product of the American education system.
Well, that's also fair, which is the same as you don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about another one for controlling the weather. The move to dim the sun is still in the works. I think there are people who don't know about this. This one has been on my radar for so long. I feel like I look into the sky and I don't need the news to tell me. I go, oh, yeah, I see what's going on here. That's not a normal sky. I do not remember this sky looking like this from my childhood. That's been the case for the last, 4 years, 5 years. There are many people who very much are aware of that, for sure. But I do think there's a lot of people who don't actually know that this is a real thing. This is a billionaire-backed, like a lot. There are a lot of billionaires involved with this project. Global initiative. It's happening all over the place. They're running tests off of several different coastlines. There was, I think, some tests that went on in California that actually got stopped. Good on you, California. You did one thing right. But they're still going on around the world. Like, there's places in South America and Africa where these test missions are still being launched to quite literally dim the sun. Again, if you think that our involvement in the atmosphere is how we prevent climate change, you have no idea how this works.
Well, they've grown up here in terms such as trust the science and all of those things. They don't view any of this as a threat. They don't view any of it as upsetting the ecological system that we're all dependent upon. They simply trust the science and trust the experts. It's funny how everybody's an expert today. As soon as you want your words to be held in high regard, all you have to do is declare yourself an expert. So these people, as you point out, who are involved with this are the multi-billionaires, those choosing once again to depopulate this planet. Don't ever let that thought go out of your mind. So as you talk about seeding clouds and causing rain, and you talk about manipulating how much sunlight's making it to the surface of the earth, these are things that are being conducted by the same group of people who talk very openly about their desire to depopulate the planet. Tie the two things together, people. We cannot be idiots about what's going on around us.
Bingo. Yeah. It does not take a lot of common sense here to figure out who wants the population to shrink. Oh, how convenient. It's the same people that have, again, the power and the wealth to control the weather. Do we think that their goals are not aligning here? Of course they're to the same ends. These are all means to an end. And to that point, let's get into the next means to this end. Control of the food. We've talked about this before. This is not a new conversation. We know our food is poison, but how bad is it? Well, some of you have heard of a peel. This is Bill Gates' spray that he sprays on the food to make it last longer. And as much as I want to think that I buy decent food, I've noticed it in my own home. And maybe you have, Dad. Maybe you can speak to this too. I've noticed where I will buy fruit and it doesn't go bad. It doesn't get moldy. It doesn't get squishy and weird. It's been a while. It's been in my fridge for longer than I should have left it in there. And I go, oh, that's weird. It still looks like fruit. I'm not going to eat it. I'd rather eat it if it was fully covered in mold at this point. The issue with this appeal product, again, it's for solving hunger, world hunger. It makes food last longer. First of all, that's not normal. It's not real food anymore. The problem is it's now been approved for organic labeling, which means anything that has been sprayed with it can still have the organic label slapped on it, which means you won't know.
So once again, they manipulate the laws to benefit themselves and to put poison into us. So the food lasts longer, more people ingest it, and they call it something that everybody believes they're getting a clean product that don't contain these preservatives and pesticides because they changed the verbiage, and that is your elected officials who happen to be at this point for all you diehard Republicans or all you diehard party line believers. This is stuff that is being participated in by both of these criminal entities called the Republican Democrat Party. They got their arms twisted up behind them by the people that own them, big pharma, big food, military industrial complex. We talk about it all the time. These are the people that dictate the laws that are being written. So the things that you see that you think are being done to your benefit to protect you are being done for quite the opposite. And that, once again, is to steal wealth and kill people, kill the common people. We need to wake up.
Of course, it's to kill people, or at the very least, make you sick. Sick in ways that you will not recover from. Chronic illnesses, autoimmune diseases. This is what happens when we eat poison, and we eat it every day. And not only are we being fed poison, we're being tricked now into thinking it's not.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
So a couple articles that you sent over that I wanted to add to this one. You had added the link about the mRNA being sprayed on food. And we've talked about this to some extent with, we've heard that some of the beef or the chicken might be injected with these mRNA vaccines. So for those of us who didn't choose to take this poison, now we're going to eat it in our meats. Well, now fruits and vegetables, they're going to have it sprayed on them because this technology exists. So, I mean, what do we do in a situation where all of the food we have access to now has these different things in it, whether it's some sort of mRNA or it's this appeal, Bill Gates, little food longevity company. What do we do? We have no choice other than to just create our own food. We have to have a garden. We have to hunt. We have to raise livestock. Like there's not a choice anymore because it's either that or you eat it. You eat the poison because that's what's available to you in the store. Mm-hmm. That is so unbelievable that we are at a point where you can't trust anything that you buy. Mm-hmm. To sustain yourself.
And again, I think we made a point earlier tonight, or maybe it was in the other session, that to me, the reason there's no outcry, the reason there's nothing, this is terrifying to most people. It pushes everybody into the realm of the normalcy syndrome or cognitive dissonance, where we simply are not able to get our head wrapped around. And we've talked about it many times in previous shows about everything you've been told is a lie. What you've been told is good is bad, and vice versa. And the Bible has some verses related to that. Woe to those that would call, black white and white black and good evil and evil good and all of those things. And that is what is going on in the world around us today. It comes down to the thing we talked about toward the end of the last one. This is good versus evil. You have to decide what side you're going to come down on and recognize the things that are going on around you. As you described many of the things tonight about the food we're partaking in, it's probably in all the bottled water with the microplastics and everything else. It's in everything that we do. We just have to be aware of it. And the only other comment I have to that, what do we do? I love the old saying, our forefathers would have been shooting a long time ago. And that is the fact, because they recognized the threat and they decided, even though the odds look daunting, we're going to take up arms because we are not going to tolerate what we know is killing us and enslaving us.
For sure. And they won because they were the good guys. Yeah. And that's actually how it works, as crazy as that sounds. Sometimes just being the good guy is enough. And I think we have to remember that when we talk about the fourth box, like, These are real threats to the people that we love. At a certain point, it's time to put your foot down.
Yep.
So, okay, they have control of our food. They have control of our weather, which ultimately, having control of the weather is the same as having control of the food. Mm-hmm. Because if you can control the weather, you can dictate what food grows where and when. Mm-hmm. Which means when we think about all of Middle America, that can change in a jiffy if someone's controlling the weather there. And they have the ability to do that now.
Of course. And the big thing is, again, all of these apparently independent little issues that are going on, surveillance, food control, wars, climate control, these are all working in concert. And it ain't to your benefit.
Yep, for sure. So let's talk about a couple more. Control of our health. We know this one is real. Big Pharma is the biggest threat to most of us. We are the most diseased country in the world. What benefit do the wealthy and the powerful have to make the most free country the most diseased? Well, if we're sick, we can't fight back. How many news stories do we have hit the surface at this point before there is no one left that is actually questioning whether or not the whole COVID-19 jab thing was poisoning en masse? If they can't poison you through the food, through the weather modification, through everything else, I have an idea. Let's just make them think they need this poison. Let's make them ask for it. Mm-hmm. It's not a theory. We have talked about it since it first hit the market. Why do you think so many people never got it? Because we knew it was poison. There were still people that went out and got it. Some for reasons that I will never be able to justify. Some for people who did it with good intention and good, fine, whatever. But now you have to deal with the consequence of that. The point is, a new study has confirmed, again, devastating genetic damage is caused by these mRNA vaccines, including the activation of cancer-causing genes and breakdowns in your immune system. I've read so many articles at this point. I've read so many articles. We have talked about this in so many episodes. This is not new information. However, article after article after article keeps coming out and saying what we already know. Evidence from these adverse events caused by the jab proves turbo cancers, autoimmune diseases, chronic illnesses that you cannot recover from, because sometimes the paralysis. There are things that you simply, your body does not have the capacity to detox and unload. This evidence is out there. So you were forced to get these shots. Someone made you feel like you did not have another option. Mm-hmm. And now this is what you're living in. You're living in this world of not knowing when you're going to have a stroke or a cancer just pop up overnight that is terminal. You don't know. That's what people are living in. And you want to try and tell me that these people don't have control over your health? They do. They really do.
Well, all of those conditions that you talk about, if you're paying attention, they are going on around you. How many friends, how many neighbors, how many associates do you know that have had these conditions that have now been linked back to this? These are anomalies. There is no historical trend that supports the numbers that have jumped up in the deaths, in the childhood diseases, in the cancers and turbo cancers that there's no apparent previous record of. These are anomalies. They happen post this jab, and we continue to pretend that this stuff isn't real. Again, It suits the global depopulation agenda quite nicely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we can talk about the whole conversation we had last week, and we can talk about the whole conversation we had this week. But at the end of the day, this is the number one threat to most people. Mm-hmm. Whether it's an active disease in your body that has already manifested, an active disease in your body that is yet to manifest, or the simple fact that you can no longer conceive children, all three of these are a threat to the population continuing.
What?
So there's a million things going on here, but this alone is enough to eradicate the population long term.
And I want to make another point about that. Like, so I know a couple of people that were accepted into public education without getting the regimen of shots. But the majority of us simply don't have the time to fight the fight to avoid getting our child enrolled into a school so that they can go off to school like every other normal kid without going through the regimen of shots, which has already introduced you to things that are quite toxic to human beings. But we all go in believing that this is being done by people that are looking out for our best interest. It simply is not so. We just have been so generationally accustomed to these things taking place that nobody even asked the question. Very, very few
Yeah.
people ask the question. And believe me, the hurdles and the difficulties that you will go through in an effort to try to get your child to avoid taking this stuff, so everybody simply complies. It's the easy way out. Well, everybody does it and everybody seems to be getting along fine. Meanwhile, the child reproduction rate continues, children continues to drop down. The fertility problems continue to crop up. The high rates of these diseases we talk about continue to, and we continue to plod along, pretending we don't see this stuff going on around us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in some ways, COVID feels like a lifetime ago. But for those of us who have stayed engaged with this, it feels like it's still looming. And I think it's not ever going to feel like it went away because we're going to continue to watch people suffer and die from something that, to your point, they chose out of convenience. They picked what happened to them because it was easy. And it's not okay because they were coerced through the measures of, I guess convenience is the word. They were coerced through it, whether one, you were forced to it, forced into it because of your job, but two, like you mentioned, it was difficult to stay outside of it. It's difficult now to have a child not go through the entire childhood vaccine schedule because it takes an incredible amount of time, effort, resources, money. Like, you have to be so devoted to this cause if you want to stay in it. And most people simply can't afford the money or the time.
That's
So
100%.
even if you're not coerced into it by being like, you'll lose your job if you don't get this, you're coerced into it by, like, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for here. You're coerced into it tangentially because you simply cannot afford to take to make the effort to do anything else.
Well,
that is coercion.
Yeah, the task is so daunting. Societal pressures, financial pressures, difficulties trying to get away from your workplace to take up this fight. It is absolutely overwhelming to try because you are being battled on every front. Remember, those that stand out are the ones that get attacked by the herd. If you happen to have the courage and say, no, I'm not taking that shot, remember the insults, remember the death threats, remember the garbage that was thrown at people of courage. And thank God, talk about raising your glass to somebody. I raised my glass to those people that said, no, I'm not doing it, despite friends, neighbors, associates, employers threatening you. And now, these same people that did not have the wherewithal, the critical thinking capability to recognize something ain't right with this, I think I'm going to hold off. Now that they are suffering the repercussions of their decisions, they still are failing to acknowledge that their choice. Most of them simply do not acknowledge that their choice. And we have friends. We've lost friends We're watching friends battle some of these diseases that are being directly linked back to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you have people in your life that are getting sick, like bad sick, and the first thing you say is, are they vaccinated? That comes down to whether your government pressured you into something or not. That's what that is. And if you don't think we're living in tyranny, when we live in a society like that, you are so far disremoved from what is happening. Now, that being said, I don't think anyone listening to this podcast is in that boat. I don't. I think people listening to this podcast actually are like, we agree with you. We didn't take it, or maybe you did, and that's fine. Fine, whatever. That's a different conversation. Maybe you did and you regret it. Maybe you recognize the coercion. Maybe you do, sure. But like, we have to be waking up people to this coercion, to this tyranny. And maybe it won't be through something like a vaccine. Maybe it needs to be through something else. So let's go through a couple more things here. The last point I want to make for the control of our health is the global pandemic agreement by the World Health Organization, of course, which thankfully I'll give Trump on a pat on the back for this one. He did not sign this pandemic agreement. There were 173 countries back in May that did. Trump was one of the few that said, no, America's not getting involved here. We will not be complying. Now, the issue with this is that the pandemic agreement calls for global governance through shared obligations and vague clauses about regulatory measures and misinformation. They quite literally talk about pathogens with pandemic potential. That means they don't need an actual outbreak to enforce what they believe is a shared obligation on a global scale. That's 173 countries we're talking about. Lockdowns, mandates, digital IDs, all these things that refer back to control grid, to AI, to depopulation. All these things fall right nicely, neatly packaged into a pandemic agreement. No, Trump did not sign the US into that. However, if someone else is in office and there's 173 people that are obligated to comply, what happens? We really think we're not going to comply. And okay, good on Trump for not signing it, but like, was he not part of the whole Operation Warp Speed initiative? He was very much part of the push for vaccines and push for lockdowns, and I'm not actually going to back up off the lockdowns now that they're in place. He was part of that the first time around. So if these things came to pass, and again, remember what this agreement states, it doesn't need to be a pandemic. It's pandemic potential. That means, just like we said earlier, crisis, maybe that was last week's episode, crisis, kind of subjective. Who gets to decide what is a crisis or what is pandemic potential? Who gets to decide?
That's correct. So the other point I want to make about that, like the World Health Organization has direct ties back to the WEF and the global cabal. We've suggested some names and so forth. These various groups or whatever they're called. The World Health Organization, which is a driving force behind these sort of international agreements, is also heavily under the influence of those very same people that have stated their intention to depopulate the world. These are the connections. These are the dots we all need to be connecting. And the people that are choosing this verbiage to put in these international agreements with the purpose of being able to say, see, we're compliant. There's a potential here for an international pandemic. So we are going to require everybody to take this shot. We're going to require everybody to not go to the workplace, not go to their place of worship, just like they did the last time. And we willingly kneel down and tolerate it. The only way this stuff ends is when we say it's over. The people stand. The game is over when the people stand, which is what we're encouraging. We're trying to get people to wake up and prepare themselves to stand in the face of the tyranny.
Exactly. So, a couple more I just want to touch on before we sign off for the night here. We've talked about control of our weather, of our food, of our health, control of our viability, control of our ability to continue to maintain ourselves as a species on this planet. Now, we should be able to do this because I am a person and I want to see myself through. I want to see my, children and my children's children. I want to see generations continue because I am a species on this planet, same as any other species. Look at any wild animal. They have the ability, they have the freedom to contribute to the continuity of their species. So I'm calling it that. I'm calling it the control of our viability because there are things that they inherently stop us from doing, which we should be allowed to do. And one of them, again, I'm going to bring up a link that you had shared previously. You had mentioned the Netherlands police have arrested Arno van Kassel, the lead attorney who is suing Bill Gates, Albert Bourla, and Mark Rutte for COVID vaccine injuries. The civil process was scheduled to begin on July 9th. Martin van Kessel was arrested in a Gestapo reminiscent early morning raid by paramilitary police on June 11th, where he was reportedly blindfolded, bound, and taken into detention, where he remains almost 2 months later. And the reason that I put this into this category is because if we see a threat, we are no longer allowed to act on it because somebody will stop us. That is not okay. That's not normal to have that level of control. Again, let's think about it as we are just a species existing on this planet. Let's think about any other species. If you recognize a threat, you confront that threat. If necessary, you take that threat out. We're not allowed to do that. And this is an example, one of many, where if we try, we will be stopped.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned a session or so back, like we've seen with the David Koresh thing, you've seen with the Randy Weaver thing up in Idaho, you've seen with the Lavoy Finnegan out in Oregon. I'm sorry. Uh, when there are threats that may appeal to the public and get some steam behind them, that the government views as a threat, when there are voices that are speaking out against the agenda and the tyranny that's going on around us, this is what happens. Now, this fella here, who is obviously pursuing legal means of remedying or attempting to remedy vaccine injuries, and because he was outspoken in public about it, he was black bagged and hauled off. What's a shame is the police actually went along with it. And that is, that goes back to the oath keepers in this country, where we were trying to encourage people that took that oath to recognize when you're being asked to do something that's unlawful. You stand up for the rule of law. You stand up for the person whose rights you are taking away, not be the muscle for those that are taking our rights away. But unfortunately, and you would see, quite honestly, you would see the same thing in this country, just like you did on J6, when all the various law enforcement agencies were beating on the people and throwing flashbangs into the crowd and all the rest of it. Instead of standing in unison and making sure that it was peaceful, but they initiated the conflict. They threw flashbangs, they threw tear gas, they started beating and all the rest of it. And now this is what the whole Oath Keepers concept was about. These are the sort of things that people that took an oath should be standing up and saying, nope, ain't going to happen. This person has a right to bring his complaint against vaccines, and we're going to see that he gets to the courtroom and has his day in court. That's what they should have done. So the cops are a bunch of punks that overseen that raid.
Right. And again, obviously this was not in America, but it does not mean that we're all not facing the same battle. Like, that's the whole point. This is a global issue. Again, this is not a Republican Democrat issue. This is a global issue of good versus evil. Again, I have another point I want to make here that very much ties into this idea. Julian Brown. Don't know if he's on your radar. I suspect for many of our listeners he is not. Julian Brown is the inventor of plastiline. Plastiline is a technology that turns plastic into fuel. Wow, that solves a lot of problems at once. Wow, we get cheap fuel. Wow, we solve an issue for climate change. We're removing trash. Seems like a pretty good deal. He's been missing for 2 weeks. Now, I'm going to go into more details here, but I do want to stop and say one thing that I have an issue with is this is a young African American man. You sure hear Black Lives Matter a lot for somebody like George Floyd, but you don't hear Black Lives Matter for somebody like Julian Brown. You don't. I don't see any Black Americans complaining about the fact that this guy went missing. He's incredibly intelligent. He has developed an incredible technology, and he's gone without a trace, and nobody cares.
Because it does not work in concert with the depopulation agenda. In fact, it works quite the opposite. We find a way to solve a couple of problems that are plaguing the planet, and we take wealth away from those that would be stealing it from us and have been for the last 100, 200, whatever, maybe thousands of years. This guy comes up with something that could obviously benefit society at large. Well, we got to do away from him because that does not help keep us in the pen.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, we're going to give fuel to people for free? No. We've been using fuel as a means to create war, to kill more people around the globe. We can't stop something like that.
Yeah.
He was on the Weather Channel back in May, and not long after, he flew to Washington, where his invention passed the diesel test certification, and then all of a sudden, in June, Julian posted a video saying he didn't expect to live much longer. This is not the first time we've seen people like him post things like this. We have seen other people. Let's look at the Epstein files, for example. Relating to the Epstein files, we've seen people say, I'm afraid I'm not going to live much longer. And if I'm dead, I didn't do it. This is not the first time we've seen this happen. He makes posts about this. He claims black helicopters are circling his home. Then on July 9th, he posts a video. He says he's under attack, and that's it. We never hear from him again. We're recording this on July 29th. This is actually going to be 2 weeks out. But I suspect that in 2 weeks when this episode airs, we will not have heard from Julian Brown, and we won't. Because it's the same reason that people who figure out how to get rid of cancer in your body go missing or end up dead. It's the same reason. Because they do not want us to know how to care for ourselves. They do not want us to be able to be viable as a species on our own without them. That means we're their slaves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the underlying point that I would hope to stress upon everybody as you talk about these very, very significant matters that are challenging all of humanity all over the planet, particularly a lot of it is originated right here in the United States. Please, please, please get past the Republican-Democrat distraction. Get past all this chatter that they're keeping us fighting amongst ourselves. The enemy is within. They sit in high places and they come up with this crap that they are forcing upon us, depopulating us, poisoning our children, and stealing the wealth that our inheritance bequeathed upon us. That is what they're doing, and we are down here picking shit with the chickens, as we said before.
Yeah, for sure. So the last thing I want to stay strong, stay fit. Be the person who can run into the building that's burning. Be the person who can save people when there is a flood. Be that person. Don't be the person that's waiting for someone to save you. Be prepared for any situation because the situation will come. It will find you. They want you sick, so maintain your health. Figure out what keeps you in good health. It's different for everyone, and it takes time. It takes effort. But we have to do it, because if we choose convenience, if we choose relying on what they tell us is health, we will never be healthy. Eat well. Find real food. It's hard to do. It takes time. Go to the farmer's market. Grow it yourself. It's hard. It is the hard choice. Do it. Get good sleep. Get real sleep. Do not be distracted by the late night TV shows that are so interesting, that are so dramatic that you get sucked into it. Go to bed. Get a real night's sleep. Allow your body to heal. It will do it on its own. Allow it to do it. Block the shit out of your life that is trying to poison you, whether it is mental, emotional, spiritual, or physical. They want you disconnected. Get to know your neighbors, build your community, build relationships, and connect spiritually with the earth and whatever higher power resonates for you, whether that is God or otherwise. These are the tools that we have. We are free as long as we allow ourselves to be. You have the ability to do all of those things right now.
Amen.
You can do them, or you can choose not to.
Amen. And the big thing, and we've mentioned many times, it takes effort. If you're gonna just sit back and enjoy the convenience, you are going to pollute and poison yourself with all of these things that were designed to do exactly that. And you made the point at the end there about the spiritual connection. If you are in any way inclined to any of the Christian doctrines, you would recall that in the Bible there's a verse, and I don't remember exactly where it comes from, but it says, and you talked about a lot of super good things we in our earth suit should be and could be doing. On the spiritual level, it tells us in the good book, in the Bible, that the nation is recognized by my name, called my name, would humble itself and pray. I would hear from heaven and heal their land. I know I've condensed that and didn't put it exactly together. It was not the verse I had for tonight. But we all need to pray. We all need to stay connected spiritually because we are in a spiritual conflict. This, again, is not a Republican-Democrat thing. That is elementary level stuff that we are dealing with here. We are so far beyond that, and we need to recognize it as such.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. That's exactly right. At the end of the day, all of this stuff, all of it, last week's episode, this week's episode, part 1, part 2, blah, 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 blah. It's all a spiritual war. All of it is. And until you get right with yourself and you make yourself a spiritual being and you figure out a connection to God, you will not fix this problem. We're not here to tell people to become conservative or vote Republican. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to remind you to speak and to know truth, and to do that by finding God and by allowing him to speak through you. That is the entire point of all this. Because if you haven't heard, Revelations is pretty intense, and I suggest if you haven't, you give it a read because you're going to want to know what's going on.
Yeah. So I think then you're about ready to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think so.
As you mentioned at the beginning, this show is going to air while we are enjoying the beautiful South Dakota climate amongst people who I have spent my life with, that being the American motorcycling community. And to a large degree, my family over the years have all enjoyed time out in the Black Hills. So look forward to seeing everybody there, and safe travels home from Sturgis to and from for all of our friends. And we look forward to recording, as you mentioned, while we're out there. We'll have a show the week after that hopefully is recorded from the Veterans Club on Main Street, South Dakota. And that broadcast will be coming to you in 2 weeks. So safe travels, everybody. I do have a Bible verse to close for tonight.
Let's do it.
Through you, we repel our foes. Through your name, we trample our enemies. For I do not trust in my bow, nor does my sword save me. For you save us from our enemies. You put those who hate us to shame. In God we have boasted all day long, and your name we will praise forever. Psalm 44, verses 5 through 8.
Great one.
All right, so until we see you from the road on Main Street, South Dakota, safe travels, stay vigilant.
Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate the support and truly love getting to share this message with anyone who wants or needs it. The best way for you to support the show is to subscribe, add a rating, and share with everyone you know. You can find us on Instagram, X, and at thefourthbox.com. We'll see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Stay vigilant.